In 490 BC, the conquering Persian Empire, led by King Darius the Great, the King of Kings, as they called him, set his eyes on the city-state of Athens in ancient Greece. He was the firm ruler of the Achaemenid Empire, the largest, most prepotent kingdom that the world had ever seen. And according to a Greek historian, Herodotus, King Darius was one of the greatest strategists known at the time, focused on consolidating power and expanding his vast empire. Now, from the outside, this invasion seemed as if it was going to be nothing short of a painless triumph for the Persians and their potent conquest. In fact, the Athenians were outmatched, 10 Persians for every 1 Greek soldier. Yet, despite that, they stood unfazed with their spears and shields in their hand, prepared to fight. A mere 9,000 Greek hoplite, born and bred warriors faced the greatest threat of annihilation against an army led by a king with the reputation of being the greatest strategist and leader. Yet instead of surrendering as any outmatched army would, they chose to fight. Now imagine putting yourself in that situation. What would give you the audacity to believe that you could come out of that fight victorious? And if you didn't, the fate of your children, wives, your entire civilization would cease to exist. Now, the same historian in his famous book known as The Histories spoke about the idea of belief. That it was this sense of belief that the Athenians carried with pride. The Athenians themselves believed that the greatest honor that they could achieve was to die on the battlefields fighting to protect, to preserve the land they called home. And it was that belief that unified them. It was that belief that gave them a sense of purpose and limitless courage. Which is why for the first time under the rule of King Darius the Great, the Persians were forced to a humiliating retreat. Belief is a strange thing. The same belief that could pose you with great power and boundless courage could very easily be the same belief that leads you to your tragic demise. The very belief that the Athenians took pride in when facing a vaulting army that gave them a sense of purpose, of courage, could have very easily been the reason for their complete and total annihilation. Now, what is belief? What is the idea of believing in something? For most of my life, I've always associated the word belief with the constellation of religion, believing in a higher power or something much bigger than ourselves. I walked into my religion class one day, and this was one of the times where I actually paid attention, but my teacher asked a very bizarre question. He asked, what does it mean to believe? And because I go to a Catholic school, I thought he was trying to relate this back to the idea of God. But in fact, he went the complete opposite direction. He said, believing is what drives us to pursue our passions, to overcome hardships. It gives us the confidence to take risks and face our fears. There's this quote by George Santayana, a philosopher: belief is not the result of logical inference or of scientific observation, but a particular species of imagination. Belief is the reason why kids are so overly joyous on a Christmas morning. The idea of Santa Claus being real doesn't really matter because the kids who believe it ultimately feel his presence. If you take away that child's belief, it doesn't matter how many presents you gift him or how many Christmas carols you make him sing. That specific feeling this child used to get can never be restored. The same concept can be applied to how religion and culture ultimately shape how we choose to live our lives and how we choose to navigate through certain circumstances. Consider the example of the evil eye in Egypt. According to religious studies professor Earl Waugh, the evil eye is the belief that there are negative powers that can be destructive to a child when they're born. When a child is born in a Muslim Egyptian family, steps are taken to protect the child from the evil eye. Boys are dressed up as girls to throw evil portents off their tracks. Girls are protected by hanging verses from the Quran in tiny containers around their necks. In some families, the Eye of Horus from ancient Egypt is placed on the walls as a symbol to protect the child. Now, why do you think Muslims in Egypt have this specific belief? The example shows how ancient Egypt cultural practices have influenced present-day Muslim beliefs in Egypt. However, this idea isn't just confined to Muslims in Egypt or even religion for that matter. Subconsciously, our beliefs determine how we choose to react and interact with the rest of the world. I'm sure you've all heard about the placebo effect. In 2010, there was a study conducted by Ted Kapchuk at Harvard Medical School in a clinical trial on patients who were suffering from irritable bowel syndrome. Now, these patients were divided into two groups, in which one group received no medication at all, while the other group received a placebo pill that contained no active ingredients. Now, over time, the results were quite astounding because the group that had been receiving the placebo pill were seen feeling superiorly better than the group who were not taking any medication at all. Now, this study is yet another example of how beliefs play a vital role on the way we function. Because based on this experiment, the patients only felt better because they believed it. This poses yet another important question: where do our beliefs come from? Because in the same way that this placebo pill was used to bring these patients into a state of mental and physical relief, there are ways that our beliefs can very easily be exploited and manipulated, and oftentimes they don't serve as relief, but rather the exact opposite. Perhaps a powerful weapon the Persian army had was the control of belief. Perhaps one reason their army was so massive, was so giant, was because many of them were slaves captive by the idea that refusing to fight would be punishable by death. Similarly, in our modern world, our beliefs are tied to forces of power and control. People are born to believe in certain rules and certain regulations. And the truth is that much of our beliefs, although we don't like to admit it, don't really come from ourselves. They are in fact the product of interactions, of encounters, of advice, through the people we meet, through the things we watch on television. Our beliefs come from the religions we're born into or the books we read, and we are subconsciously the byproduct of our society. But as society changes, the modern perception of belief within that community changes as well. Just like in Greece, that prideful, honorable idea of dying in battle for your country isn't as prominent or even encouraged anymore as it was in ancient Greece. And because belief spreads like wildfire, it is that idea of believing in something that makes it so powerful. And anything that powerful can be manipulated and weaponized. Let me illustrate this in a more modern way. If I told you that I'm a professional skier, you might be a little skeptical, but if I showed you a picture of me skiing with my professional goggles on a steep hill, you'd probably start believing me, right? Well, because right now we put a lot of trust in pictures of things we see on the internet. But fabricated images are often one way that is used to manipulate certain beliefs. A study in the journal Cognitive Research Principles and Implications found that people could detect a false image only 60% of the time. And when they knew an image was altered, they could only detect what was wrong with the image only 50% of the time. With editing software and deepfake technology, anyone today can manipulate images. And this isn't just about sharing fun pictures on social media. This can have a gradual effect and shift our perception of reality. According to a New York Times article written by Cecilia Kang, in the lead up of the US 2020 presidential election, Facebook was accused of spreading misleading information related to political advertising to purport certain ideas and allowed campaigns to spread inaccurate information to potential voters. Now, belief is a strange yet powerful thing. Belief can give us comfort, enable us to pursue our passions, to overcome hardships. It gives us the confidence to take risks and face our fears. But the same belief that could rise you to infinite heights and graceful victories could very easily be the same belief that causes your demise. Belief can easily be shaped, propagated, and influenced by society for the better or worse, which is why it is vital that you are able to decipher the beliefs that you choose to keep a part of you. Now, I'm not here to tell you what to believe. Just know that every belief comes from somewhere. So just like the Athenians, pride yourself with your beliefs, but maybe, just maybe, the next time you choose to express them, think about what made you acquire those beliefs in the first place.